Chapter 11. The Cattle of the Sun God. The sea glistened beneath a calm sky, a rare moment of stillness that felt more like warning than mercy. After surviving the terror of Scylla and the roar of Charybdis, Odysseus and his men found themselves adrift, bruised but alive. The ship creaked with wear, and the men's faces were hollow from hunger and grief. As they sailed, an island rose from the waves, rich and green, sun-warmed and quiet. The scent of grass and fresh water drifted to them on the wind. This was Thrinacia, the island of the sun god Helios, and Odysseus's heart sank, for he knew what danger it held. Tiresias had spoken of it. Circe, too. "Harm not the cattle," they had warned. "They are sacred, immortal. If you slay even one, ruin will follow. Your men will die, and you will return home alone, if at all." Odysseus repeated these words to his men as they beached the ship and made camp. "Swear to me," he said. "Swear by all the gods that you will not touch the herds of Helios." The men raised their hands and swore. They promised, but their eyes burned with the look of men who feared starvation more than divine wrath. For a time, the island seemed a gift. Streams ran clear. Fruit grew on trees. They hunted wild birds and caught fish from the shore. But the winds would not change. Day after day, the sails hung limp. The ship could not move. The men waited, and their food dwindled. The fish became harder to find. The fruit grew scarce. Then the storms returned, sudden and fierce, driving them into a cave for shelter. Weeks passed. Their bellies hollowed. Their promises grew faint. Hunger gnawed at their oaths until they began to see the cattle not as sacred but as salvation. Odysseus, fearing what might come, went inland to pray. He climbed a high rock, poured wine to the gods, and begged them for mercy or a sign. But the gods gave him sleep. He lay on the rock, and slumber claimed him. In that brief absence, fate moved. The leader of the men, Eurylochus, spoke with fire in his voice. "What is death by starvation compared to death at sea?" he said. "Let us eat. We will build altars. We will make sacrifices. And if the gods strike us down, let it be after our bellies are full." The others listened. Their mouths watered. Their hands reached for knives. They slaughtered the cattle, great golden beasts who did not flee, as if knowing this was already decided. They carved the flesh, lit fires, and roasted the meat. The scent rose into the sky. Odysseus returned too late. The smoke betrayed them. He saw the bones, the fires, the fat crackling, and he knew. A great dread fell upon him, deeper than sorrow, deeper than anger. The men greeted him with weak smiles, offering apologies, but their fate had already begun to unravel. The next day, the storm ceased. The winds returned, soft and steady. The ship was repaired. The sea looked smooth again. It was a trap. The gods often wrap punishment in calm. They set sail, hopeful once more, their bellies full, their eyes brightened by the taste of meat. But the sun god Helios had seen everything. From the high halls of Olympus he demanded justice. "Strike them down," he said to Zeus. "They have slain what I love." Zeus, ruler of the sky, nodded once. "Their doom is sealed." At sea, the sky turned black. Thunder cracked. The winds howled. A bolt of lightning shattered the mast. The sails tore like paper. The sea rose in walls. One by one, the men were cast into the deep. The ship broke apart. Odysseus clung to a broken timber, the bodies of his men vanishing beneath the foam. He cried out to the gods, but no one answered. The wrath of Helios had come, swift and final. Not one man remained. Only Odysseus, soaked, wounded, drifting on a piece of his shattered hope. Days passed. The sea carried him alone, through hunger and madness, past strange waters and silent shores. He floated like a ghost, skin burned, lips cracked, thoughts broken by sorrow. At last he reached an island, small, quiet, hidden by trees and rocky cliffs. This was Ogygia, the land of the nymph Calypso. She would find him there, lying on the sand like driftwood. She would shelter him, heal him, and trap him with love. But that tale would come later. For now, Odysseus lay alone, the last of his crew, punished by the gods, and still not yet home. The journey had begun with warriors and glory. It now moved on through loss and exile. Odysseus had seen men fall to monsters and storms, to hunger and hubris, and though he lived, he did not feel victorious. He lived because the gods willed it, because fate had not yet finished its work. But he had paid the price. The cattle of the sun had been sacred, the warning had been clear, and still his men had chosen death. That choice had ended them. The Odyssey continued. Chapter 12. Shipwreck and the Island of Calypso. The sea had no color. It was not blue, nor gray, nor green. It was something darker, a silence that stretched beneath the sun. Odysseus floated alone, clinging to a splintered mast, the last remnant of his ship. Around him nothing remained of his crew. The voices of his men, their laughter, their cries, their dreams of home, all gone, swallowed by the wrath of Helios and the judgment of Zeus. Days passed in blur and suffering. Hunger carved hollows in his face. The sun burned his skin. Salt encrusted his wounds. The waves mocked him gently, lifting and lowering him like a broken reed. Then, through the mist of pain and the blur of light, an island appeared, small and green, ringed with cliffs and forests. It was Ogygia, a place untouched by time, hidden from the eyes of gods and men. There, the nymph Calypso ruled in solitude, daughter of the Titan Atlas, as immortal and ancient as the sky. She saw the broken man wash ashore and rushed him with awe. He was not the first stranger to land upon her island, but he was the first she could not forget. She nursed him in her cave of stone and flowering vines, whispering songs of comfort while he drifted between sleep and sorrow. When Odysseus awoke, it was to softness. He lay on a bed of moss beneath a roof of woven leaves. The scent of myrtle and cedar filled the air. Calypso sat beside him, her eyes shining with strange warmth. "You are safe now," she said. "You will not suffer here." He blinked at her voice, not understanding. His mind still drifted with the waves, searching for companions who no longer lived. But she touched his brow and fed him, and over time, his strength returned. His memories sharpened, his grief deepened. Calypso offered him everything. She promised him immortality. "Stay," she whispered. "You need not suffer the sea again. You need not age. Be my husband, rule here with me. Forget your pain." And for a time, Odysseus did not speak. He watched the waves from her shore and wondered if it could be true. A life without death. A life without war. A life without loss. But always, behind his eyes, Ithaca called, Penelope, Telemachus. The land he had fought for, bled for, his heart could not forget. He was a man, not a god. He needed the mortal world, with all its sorrow and love. So the days passed one into the next, blending like mist over water. Time did not move on Ogygia. It simply stretched. Odysseus worked in the grove, walked the shore, spoke little. At night, Calypso sang to him and wove tapestries of light. She gave him music and fruit and laughter, but Odysseus sat by the rocks, staring across the endless sea, and wept. Each evening he climbed to a high cliff and watched the sunset, and each morning he found no ship, no wind, no sign of change. His heart remained chained not by love, but by longing. At last the gods took notice. On Olympus, Athena pleaded with Zeus. "You have tormented him long enough. Let him go home." And Zeus, nodding slowly, sent Hermes to the island. The messenger god arrived in a blaze of golden light, winged sandals touching the sand like feathers. He found Calypso beneath her blooming roof, weaving with threads that shimmered like fireflies. "Zeus commands it," he said. "Release him." Calypso raged. "You gods envy what you do not control. I gave him love. I offered him peace. Must he suffer again?" But Hermes only bowed and vanished. That evening, Calypso came to Odysseus with tears in her eyes. "I will not hold you," she said. "The gods have spoken. You may build a raft and leave this place. The sea will not be kind. But you are free." Odysseus, though his heart was torn, bowed low. "You have been kind to me," he said, "but I cannot stay. My home waits. My journey is not over." She gave him tools, cloth, rope. She gave him food and wine and a wind to start the voyage. But as he built his raft, she watched from the shadows, sorrow in her eyes, love that could not stop what must be. On the morning of his departure, Calypso stood beside him as he fastened the last knot. "You could have been a god," she whispered. Odysseus looked into her ageless eyes. "I am a man," he said, "and that is enough." He stepped onto the raft, the wind caught the sail, and he drifted from the shore. Calypso stood alone, her hair stirring in the breeze, until the horizon swallowed him. For 17 days he drifted, the sea alternately kind and cruel. The stars returned each night, cold and watchful. On the 18th day, Poseidon saw him. The sea god, still bitter, raised a storm that shattered the raft and hurled Odysseus into the deep. Waves tore at him, lightning flashed, and the sky howled with hatred. But Odysseus would not die. Clinging to the wreckage, he prayed to Ino, the sea spirit, who took pity and gave him a veil that would keep him from drowning. He wrapped it around his chest and swam, beaten and gasping, toward the faint shape of land. And thus he washed ashore once more, this time upon the land of the Phaeacians, a gentle people, blessed by the gods, who would hear his tale and offer him passage home. But that was still ahead. For now, Odysseus lay half-buried in seaweed and sand, exhausted beyond speech, dreaming of a bed not of moss, but of linen, not of an immortal's embrace, but of his wife's quiet strength. The island of Calypso was behind him, its enchantments broken, its peace refused. What waited ahead was still unknown. Chapter 13. The Counsel of the Phaeacians. Odysseus lay in the sand like driftwood, salt-crusted and weary, the waves lapping softly against his feet. He had washed ashore half dead, but alive, delivered from Calypso's enchanted isle, through Poseidon's wrath, and now onto the shores of a kingdom unknown. Around him rose tall reeds and flowering bushes, and above him the sun blinked through drifting clouds. He stirred, groaned, and dragged himself beneath an olive tree. There, hidden by its branches, he fell into a deep sleep, the first without fear in many days. When he woke, laughter filled the air. Girls were playing on the beach, their voices light as gulls on the wind. One stepped away from the others and came close. Her name was Nausicaa, daughter of King Alcinous of the Phaeacians. She had come to wash linen by the stream, but found instead a man, wild-haired and weary, yet noble in bearing. Odysseus rose and spoke gently, shielding his eyes. "Princess," he said, "I am a stranger in need, not by choice but by fate. Have mercy." Nausicaa, wise beyond her years, saw the truth in him. She brought him clothes, food, and led him toward her father's halls. Odysseus followed, walking through gardens rich with vines and trees heavy with fruit. The palace of the Phaeacians gleamed like polished marble, its walls adorned with bronze and gold. Servants moved silently, and fountains sang in the courtyards. It was a land blessed by the gods, untouched by war or grief. Nausicaa instructed him to wait outside the gates, and then enter on his own, falling at the feet of Queen Arete, her mother. "She is wise and kind," she said. "If she favors you, the rest will follow." Odysseus entered, cloaked in mist by Athena's hand so that no one noticed his travel-worn state. When he dropped to his knees before the queen, the spell lifted, and all gasped at the sudden appearance of a stranger. King Alcinous, startled but curious, rose to meet him. Odysseus bowed low. "I am a man from far away, blown off course by the wrath of the sea. I seek only shelter, and, if the gods allow, passage home." Arete, moved by his humility, welcomed him. Alcinous, seeing the favor in his queen's eyes, offered a seat at the table and a feast in his honor. For many days Odysseus stayed among the Phaeacians. He did not reveal his name at first, nor his lineage. He ate, rested, and listened to the music of lyres, the tales of distant heroes, and the songs of war and peace. But when Alcinous declared a festival in his honor, with games and storytelling, Odysseus could no longer stay hidden behind silence. He watched the Phaeacian youths throw discus and race, their limbs swift and strong, their spirits untouched by hardship. One youth mocked him, seeing only a stranger's weariness. Odysseus, stung by pride, rose and hurled a discus farther than any had that day. A hush fell. Alcinous, now impressed beyond doubt, turned to him that evening and said, "Tell us your name, stranger. Tell us your story, so that we may know the man who has shown such strength." And at last, Odysseus spoke. His voice was quiet at first, but each word held the weight of pain and memory. "I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, king of Ithaca." Gasps rang out. The name had traveled far, carried by songs of Troy. And now, here he was, not as a conqueror, but as a castaway. He told them all, from the fall of Troy to the Cyclops cave, from Circe's island to the underworld, from the Sirens to Scylla and Charybdis, from the slaughter of Helios's cattle to Calypso's love. The room grew silent as he spoke, the firelight flickering across faces filled with awe and sorrow. When he finished, Alcinous rose. "You shall not suffer more. Tomorrow, we will send you home, with treasures to honor your trials. The sea will be your path, not your prison." True to his word, Alcinous called forth his sailors. The next day, they prepared a grand ship, swift and sturdy. Odysseus was bathed and clothed in fine robes. Gifts were placed aboard: gold, bronze, linen, and wine. That evening, a final feast was held, and the bard sang once more, not of Achilles or Hector, but of Odysseus, the man who had endured. Tears filled Odysseus's eyes, for the song reminded him of what he had lost and what he still hoped to gain. At dawn, he boarded the ship. Alcinous clasped his hand. "May you find your home, and may the gods give you peace at last." The sailors rowed without sound. Odysseus lay on soft blankets in the hold, his body at ease, his heart racing. For the first time in years, he did not watch the horizon. He closed his eyes and slept. The oars dipped and rose, dipped and rose. The sea, for once, was kind, and as he slept, the ship drew near the shores of Ithaca. The Odyssey neared its end. Chapter 14. Odysseus returns to Ithaca. The sea was calm, the sky dim with early dawn, as the Phaeacian ship glided across the final stretch of water. Odysseus lay beneath a woven canopy, wrapped in soft robes, still asleep. The journey had been silent, smooth as a dream. And now, at last, Ithaca's rocky cliffs rose from the sea, cloaked in mist, unchanged by time or war. The sailors, true to their word, rowed into a quiet cove, where the beach met a grove of olive trees. Gently, they lifted the sleeping hero and laid him on the sand, placing his treasures beside him. Without word or ceremony, they turned back to their ship and vanished over the horizon. Odysseus awoke with a start. The air was different, sharper, familiar. He sat up, blinking at the landscape. Trees he knew, stones shaped by time and memory. He was home. After years of wandering, of loss, of gods and monsters, he had returned to the soil of Ithaca. And yet his heart was still. There was no joy yet, no triumph, only caution. He knew his house would not be as he had left it. He knew enemies might wait in his halls. The journey was not yet done, and so he hid his treasures beneath a tree and wandered into the grove. There, Athena appeared. The gray-eyed goddess stood in the form of a shepherd boy, staff in hand, eyes sparkling. "Odysseus," she said, "you are as cunning as the sea is wide. Do you not recognize your land?" He smiled faintly. "I do, but I am not ready to be recognized by it." She cast off her disguise and took her true form. "Wise as ever," she said. "Then let me help you." With a touch, she changed his appearance. His skin grew weathered, his clothes tattered. His eyes clouded with age. A beggar stood where a king had lain. "Now," she said, "you may walk safely among them." She told him of what had become of his home. Suitors, young, arrogant nobles, had filled his palace, each hoping to claim Penelope and Ithaca in his absence. They ate his food, drank his wine, mocked his name, and yet Penelope had not given in. Each night, she unraveled the shroud she wove by day, stalling for time. Telemachus, his son, now a man, searched the seas for news of his father. But danger stirs, Athena warned. The suitors plan to kill him upon his return. At her command, Odysseus made his way to the hut of Eumaeus, his loyal swineherd, who knew him not, but welcomed the disguised stranger with kindness. Eumaeus fed him, gave him shelter, and spoke warmly of his absent master. Odysseus was a just man, he said. If he lives, the gods are not blind. Odysseus, moved beyond words, listened in silence. That night, another guest arrived. Telemachus returned from his travels, weary but alive. Eumaeus rushed to greet him, eyes brimming with tears. Odysseus watched his son from the shadows, seeing the strength in his stride, the weight of longing in his voice. Chapter 16. Reunion with Telemachus. The sun had barely crested the hills when Odysseus stepped through the orchard path that led to the swineherd's hut, hidden in the foothills of Ithaca. A faint mist hung in the trees, and birds stirred the stillness with morning song. Inside the hut, Telemachus sat beside the hearth, his young face shadowed by worry. He had returned from his long search abroad only days ago, and though he had found no word of his father in the world of men, something in his heart had changed. He no longer mourned the dead. He prepared to stand among the living. When the door opened and the beggar entered, Telemachus rose in courtesy, never suspecting the truth beneath the cloak and beard. He offered a stool, poured wine, and asked gentle questions of the road. Odysseus, watching his son, fought to keep the storm within him still. How tall he had grown, how steady his gaze. The boy he had left was now a man, and though he burned to embrace him, he knew the moment must be chosen with care. Athena, unseen but near, saw this, and she willed it time. She touched Odysseus with her power, and in an instant the rags vanished. His skin smoothed, his stature straightened, his eyes blazed like storm-lit seas. Telemachus staggered back, clutching the air as though waking from a dream. "Stranger," he whispered, "you are no longer what you were." Odysseus stepped forward, tears shining in his eyes. "Telemachus," he said, "it is I am your father, returned at last." The silence that followed was deep. Then the boy moved, arms outstretched, and they fell into each other's grasp. There are many kinds of reunion in this world. Some are full of laughter, others of tears. This one was full of silence at first, of disbelief dissolving into truth. Telemachus held his father, the weight of years crumbling around them. Odysseus, who had spoken with ghosts, faced monsters, defied gods, now trembled in the arms of his son. The years stolen from them could not be returned, but they were together now, and that was a victory greater than conquest. They sat by the fire and spoke long into the morning. Odysseus told of his voyage, of Troy, of the Cyclops, of Circe, the underworld, and Calypso's lonely love. Telemachus listened, wide-eyed, each tale a key unlocking the mystery of the man before him. Then Odysseus turned serious. "We must act swiftly," he said. "The suitors grow bold. They feast in my hall, plot your death, and claim your mother. But they have not yet faced Ithaca's true king." Telemachus nodded. "I am ready." Together, they laid out their plan. Odysseus would return to the palace in disguise. He would study his enemies. Telemachus would remove the weapons from the hall, as if to safeguard them from quarrels. Their allies, Eumaeus the swineherd and Phaeacians the cowherd, would be brought in once trust was sure. When the moment came, they would strike. It would not be easy. The suitors were many, armed and arrogant. But justice does not fear numbers. It waits for its hour. As the day wore on, they practiced with quiet discipline. Telemachus learned the timing of his father's signals, the strength in his grip, the fury still alive in his gaze. Odysseus, though grayed by hardship, moved with the ease of a hunter. The years had taught him not only patience, but clarity. His purpose was no longer glory, it was restoration. The house of Ithaca had been dark for too long. It was time to bring the light back. That evening, Odysseus returned to his disguise. The beard returned, the cloak frayed, the skin weathered once more. Telemachus helped him bind the rags, his hand steady, his heart burning. "No one must know until the moment is right," Odysseus said. "Not even your mother." Telemachus nodded, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "I will follow you." And so father and son, joined by blood and bound by fate, walked side by side down the path toward the city. To the world, they were a beggar and a prince, but the gods knew better. They watched from the clouds above, and they whispered among themselves that the storm was nearly upon Ithaca, not of wind, not of sea, but of reckoning. The Odyssey was no longer a journey across distant lands. It had come home. Chapter 15. The Disguise of a Beggar. The sun rose slowly over Ithaca, casting pale gold across the rugged hills and olive groves. In the low morning light, a bent figure shuffled along the path toward the city. His cloak was torn, his beard unkempt, his skin sun-dark and weary. None who passed him gave him a second glance. He was only a beggar, another shadow among many. But beneath the grime and rags walked Odysseus, king of Ithaca, master of guile and endurance, returned at last to the heart of his kingdom. Athena had worked her spell well. Even close friends and old retainers would not know him. It was not just his face that had changed, but his voice, his posture, the very way he moved. Yet his eyes remained sharp, watching, calculating. He entered the gates of his city without fanfare. 20 years had passed since he had last walked those streets. The houses looked smaller now, the people older, and in the air hung something bitter, decay, disrespect, the weight of unearned power. He made his way to his own palace, where once lords and warriors had gathered to feast in his name. Now the door stood open to men who laughed too loudly, ate too greedily, drank too deep. The suitors, over 100 of them, lounged on his chairs, insulted his name, plotted over his wine. They competed for Penelope's hand as if she were a prize to be seized, not a queen to be won. And she, ever wise, ever faithful, endured them with dignity, buying time with riddles and tricks, waiting for a man the world believed dead. At the threshold, Odysseus paused. A dog lay nearby, old, thin, its coat gray with age. Argos, his dog, the pup he had trained as a young man. Argos lifted his head, ears twitching. Though blind and frail, he smelled the truth. His tail thumped weakly. Odysseus blinked away tears. He could not speak. The dog lowered his head and died, having waited 20 years to see his master again. Odysseus stepped inside, heart heavy and burning. He was greeted with scorn. The suitors mocked him, tossed him scraps, sneered at his rags. One of them, Antinidius, cruelest of all, struck him with a stool. Odysseus did not flinch. His patience was iron. He endured the insult. He sat by the hearth and watched. Each man revealed his nature in the way he ate, the way he spoke to servants, the the way he treated a stranger. Odysseus remembered their faces. Justice would come, but not yet. Among the faithful few was Eumaeus, the swineherd who had first given him shelter, and Phaeacians, the cowherd, quiet and loyal. Odysseus spoke carefully with them in private, learning who still served with honor. Both men spoke of their longing for the true king's return, their disgust with the suitors, their loyalty to Penelope and her son. In time, he revealed himself to them. Tears flowed. Oaths were sworn. 4 men now stood in secret alliance: Odysseus, Telemachus, Eumaeus, and Phaeacians, ready to retake what had been stolen. Meanwhile, Penelope moved through the halls with grace and grief. Her eyes had grown tired, her heart torn between hope and resignation. Yet when she saw the beggar, something stirred. She questioned him kindly, asking of his travels, and he, weaving words like silk, spoke of Odysseus, not as himself, but as another who had seen the hero on his journey. Penelope listened, silent and still. "He will return," the beggar said, "soon." She did not know why she believed him, but a part of her, long buried under sorrow, flickered into life. That night she ordered a test. "Tomorrow," she said aloud, "I will offer my hand to the man who can string Odysseus's great bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads." The suitors laughed, confident that they would win. But Odysseus in his rags smiled to himself. The time had come. And thus, beneath disguise and danger, the king of Ithaca moved among his enemies. The halls of his home were no longer a palace. They were a battlefield in waiting. He had returned not to celebration, but to silence and shadows. Yet every step brought him closer to the reckoning. Every insult carved the path to justice. The Odyssey was nearly complete. Chapter 17. The Contest of the Bow. The hall of Odysseus stood tall against the morning sky, but its heart had long been hollowed by greed. Inside, the suitors laughed and drank, their robes stained with wine, their voices echoing off the walls like crows cawing above a battlefield. They sat upon Odysseus's benches, feasted at his tables, and carved his kingdom into their games. None among them knew that the king had returned. None saw the storm building in the shape of a beggar, quiet among the shadows. Penelope entered the hall with eyes like polished stone. Dignity cloaked her in silence. 20 years had passed since her husband's ship had vanished beyond the horizon, but she had not forgotten him. Nor had she surrendered. Now she stood with a bow in her hand, a great curved weapon made of polished horn and wood strung so tight that few in Ithaca could bend it. "Today," she said, "I will choose a husband. He who can string this bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads shall be my lord." The suitors roared their approval. Each believed himself strong enough to master the weapon. The axes were placed in a line, their hollow rings aligned. The bow passed from hand to hand. One by one, they tried. One by one, they failed. The string refused to bend. Their arms shook. Sweat ran down proud faces. Some laughed nervously. Others cursed. None succeeded. The bow was more than a weapon. It was a test, one only Odysseus could pass. From his seat at the hearth, the beggar spoke. His voice was soft, but it carried. "May I try?" The room fell silent, then erupted in mocking laughter. Antinous stood, red with scorn. "You? An old tramp?" But Penelope, who had spoken with the beggar before, raised a hand. "Let him try," she said. "Let fate speak." Then, without a word, she turned and left the hall, unable to watch what her heart feared and hoped in equal measure. The bow passed into Odysseus's hands. He ran his fingers along it, caressing the wood as if greeting an old friend. He examined the string. Then, in one smooth motion, he strung the bow. No tremble, no struggle. A silence fell so deep it seemed even the hearth fire held its breath. He plucked the string. It sang like a lyre. Then he took an arrow from the quiver, notched it, and aimed. The shaft flew like lightning. It passed clean through all 12 axe heads, thudding into the timber beyond. No one moved. No one breathed. Then Odysseus stood. The disguise fell from his shoulders. Athena's magic lifted. His face shone in the firelight, lean and fierce, his eyes sharp as blades. "I am Odysseus," he said, "King of Ithaca. You who have dishonored my house, eaten my food, threatened my wife and son, you will pay." Panic exploded. Some reached for weapons, but Telemachus had already locked them away. The suitors were trapped. Odysseus turned to Telemachus, Eumaeus, and Phaeacians, each now armed and ready. "Strike," he said. "Let justice speak." And justice thundered through the hall. Chapter 18. The Slaughter of the Suitors. The hall that once echoed with the laughter of uninvited men now held only the whirring silence before a storm. Odysseus stood tall, bow in hand, face revealed, eyes lit with fury and purpose. Around him, the suitors trembled. Some stammered, some cursed, some bolted toward the walls, hoping to vanish into stone. But there was no escape. Telemachus had closed and barred the great doors. Eumaeus and Phaeacians had hidden the weapons. The wolves had trapped the herd. And now came the reckoning. Antinous, leader of the suitors, rose from his seat with a sneer, goblet still in hand. He reached for a word, for a threat, for a lie that might buy him time. But Odysseus raised his bow and loosed the string. The arrow struck Antinous in the throat. His cup dropped, spilling wine like blood before his body followed. Gasps rose like smoke. Chairs scraped. Men screamed. Odysseus's voice rang out. "You fed on my wealth, courted my wife, threatened my son. You showed no fear of gods or man. Now you shall answer for it." The next arrow flew, then another. Telemachus leapt beside his father, sword in hand, his first battle fought not on foreign shores, but in his own home. Eumaeus and Phaeacians took up arms, striking down suitors as they scrambled for shelter behind pillars and overturned tables. But there was no safety in the Hall of Justice. The gods watched. The bloodline defended itself. The suitors fought back, grabbing what weapons they could. Swords from walls, spears from hidden corners, but they were untrained in war. They were lords, not soldiers. Their blades were dull with disuse, their courage soft with ease. Odysseus moved like the sea he had crossed, relentless, unpredictable. Arrows found hearts. Blades met flesh. And as each man fell, the room became less a courtship hall and more a tomb. One suitor Eurymachus dropped to his knees. "It was not me," he cried. "It was Antinous. He led us. Spare us, and we will repay all we have taken." Odysseus stepped forward. "You all drank my wine. You all planned my son's death. There is no repayment that buys off shame." He struck Eurymachus down with a blade through the chest. The suitors tried to regroup. A few rushed the doors. Others tried to form a line. But Odysseus and his allies were a wall of fire. Telemachus fought fiercely beside his father, proving with each blow that blood runs true. Eumaeus fought with the rage of the forgotten. Phaeacians wept as he fought, mourning the ruin of the home he had served so long. When the last suitor fell, silence returned. The hall stank of blood and smoke. Bodies lay strewn among the wreckage of stolen feasts and shattered goblets. Odysseus stood in the center, bow lowered, chest heaving. For a long time, none of them spoke. Then Odysseus turned to his son. "It is done," he said. "The house is ours again." But justice was not finished. Servants and maids had watched it all. Some had stayed loyal. Others had whispered secrets to the suitors, had laughed at their cruelty, had betrayed Penelope's dignity. Odysseus judged them with the same calm he had shown the suitors. The faithful were spared. The traitors were punished. The blood of Ithaca was cleansed, not only by blade, but by truth. Athena, watching from Olympus, smiled. Her favorite had not failed her. Justice had been patient. Now it had been swift. And yet she knew the hardest moments still lay ahead, for Odysseus had slain the enemies. But what would Penelope say when her stranger beggar was revealed to be a king soaked in blood? Could love survive such distance and such fury? The answer waited beyond the chamber of the dead, in the quiet room where Penelope still sat, waiting. Chapter 19. The Recognition of Penelope. The hall stood silent, the storm spent. Broken tables lay in piles. Arrows jutted from columns. Bodies slumped in unnatural repose across the stones. Odysseus stood still, blood on his hands, the bow quiet at last. His breath came slow, his shoulders heavy, not from battle, but from memory. Around him stood Telemachus, Eumaeus, and Phaeacians, their hearts pounding with the weight of what had been reclaimed. Yet the work was not finished. Justice had returned to the house of Odysseus, but the soul of it remained waiting in another room behind another door. Penelope sat in the upper chamber, surrounded by shadows and silence. The distant sound of battle had faded. She had heard the clash, the cries, the sudden hush. Her maids, trembling, whispered that the suitors were dead, that a beggar had transformed into a warrior, that Odysseus himself had returned. But Penelope, long seasoned by sorrow, did not rise. Her heart dared not leap. Too many years had passed. Too many false hopes had withered. "I will see with my own eyes," she said, "and even then, I will not trust them too quickly." Odysseus bathed, dressed in clean robes, and entered the chamber. He came not as a beggar now, nor as a king in armor, but as a man shaped by time and pain. Penelope looked at him, truly looked, and felt a tremor in her chest. His face was familiar, his stance, the curve of his shoulders, that age and hardship had changed him. Could this truly be her husband? Or was it a god in disguise, sent to torment her once more? She said little. He said less. They stared at one another like strangers at the edge of a dream. Telemachus, overcome by the cold distance, cried out, "Mother, this is no trick! This is my father, your husband, the man you have waited for!" But Penelope shook her head. "If it is truly he," she said, "then he will know our secret. The one thing only he and I share." Odysseus watched her closely. He saw the caution in her eyes, the longing buried beneath it. He nodded once. "Prepare the bed," she told her maids. "Move it into the hallway." But Odysseus stepped forward, his voice firm. "That cannot be done," he said. "The bed cannot be moved. I built it myself, around the trunk of an olive tree. I carved it with my own hands. Its roots run into the ground. If it has been moved, then no one sleeps in it now." Penelope gasped. Tears welled in her eyes, and she covered her face. Only Odysseus could have known the truth. That secret, buried in wood and love, could not be guessed or mimicked. It was theirs alone. The years, the grief, the silence, they shattered in an instant. She ran to him, and they embraced, weeping not with sorrow, but with release. Husband and wife, separated by war and fate, held each other as though trying to make up for every missed moment, every night spent wondering if the other still breathed. No more disguises, no more tests. This was no dream. This was home. They talked through the night, their words tumbling like water from a spring. She told him of the suitors' cruelty, of Telemachus growing without a father, of the weaving and unweaving of the shroud. He told her of the Trojan War, of the trials, the monsters, the gods, of Circe and Calypso and the ghosts of the dead, of the friends he lost, the strangers who helped him, and the strength it took to reach her again. Their stories filled the dark until the stars faded and morning returned, and as the sun rose over Ithaca, it lit not just a kingdom restored, but a marriage renewed. Penelope and Odysseus stood side by side once more, two souls forged in sorrow and sealed in faith. No greater reunion had ever graced the halls of man. But beyond the palace news would spread, families would mourn the suitors, anger would stir, and peace, though desired, would still need to be won. The Odyssey was almost over. Chapter 20. Peace restored in Ithaca. Morning broke over Ithaca like a blessing. The sky blushed with gold, and the olive trees shimmered in soft light. Birds sang from the hills, and sheep stirred in the pastures. Yet beneath this peaceful veil the air trembled with tension. Word of the suitors' deaths had begun to spread. Mothers wailed. Brothers gripped their swords. Fathers cursed the name of Odysseus. Vengeance stirred among those who had lost kin to the justice dealt in the palace hall. The people of Ithaca had long watched their king's absence. Now they saw his return marked by blood. Odysseus stood in the courtyard, calm as stone. Around him, loyal men gathered. Telemachus stood at his side, taller with every breath. Eumaeus and Phaeacians flanked them, eyes watchful. But they were few. The sons of the slain were many. A reckoning loomed, not from gods, but from men. Athena, watching from Olympus, frowned. Her champion had triumphed, yes, but peace hung by a thread. If it snapped, Ithaca would drown in civil war. Zeus spoke then, voice thundering across the heavens, "Let this be ended." And Athena descended once more, veiled in mortal form. She appeared to Odysseus and whispered a path forward. "Go," she said, "to the old orchard, where your father Laertes dwells. You must show him who you are. Let the roots of your house bind the kingdom anew." Odysseus obeyed. In the fields beyond the city, Laertes worked in silence, bent with age, hands black with earth. The years had carved sorrow into his back. When Odysseus approached, the old man did not raise his head. He saw only another traveler. "What news of Ithaca?" he asked. Voice rough, Odysseus paused, then answered with a tale of a man lost and found. "I met your son," he said. "He lives. He has returned." Laertes looked up, eyes sharp with sudden light. "Tell me the proof," he said. "Tell me something only he would know." And Odysseus, smiling, did just that. He spoke of the fruit trees his father had planted for him when he was a child. He named each one, the fig, the pear, the olive. Laertes trembled. His son had returned. Father and son embraced, and the fields seemed to sigh with relief. But peace had not yet come. The families of the suitors gathered in the square, blades drawn, voices loud with rage. "Shall there be no law?" they cried. "He has murdered our sons in cold blood." Even the gods watched with caution. Ithaca stood on the brink. Odysseus returned with Telemachus and his small band. The crowd parted. There, before all, he spoke, not with threats, but with truth. "I was your king. You knew me once. You feasted in my halls, stood with me in war. Then I vanished. You believed me dead. But I lived. And I returned to find strangers in my home, dishonoring my wife, plotting against my son. I did not spill innocent blood. I punished those who trespassed on my throne." Some in the crowd stirred uneasily. Others raised their voices still. A spear might have flown. But Athena appeared then, not in disguise, but in her full glory. Her armor gleamed like starlight. Her voice rang like iron. "Enough," she said. "You have seen war. You have seen justice. Now see peace." At her command, the weapons dropped. The anger melted. Memory returned. Of a kingdom ruled in wisdom, of a time when gods and men walked together in harmony. The people knelt. "We will follow Odysseus," they said. "Let Ithaca know peace." And so it was. Odysseus walked through his land, no longer hunted, no longer hidden. He ruled with patience, his mind tempered by trials few could fathom. Penelope walked beside him, queen once more, her gaze calm and strong. Telemachus grew into his inheritance, beloved by the people, guided by his father's strength and his mother's wisdom. The palace was restored. The fields bore fruit. Songs were sung again in the halls. But sometimes, late at night, Odysseus would sit alone beneath the stars. He would listen to the wind and remember, not with bitterness, not with pain, but with awe. For few men had seen what he had seen. Fewer still had returned. His name was legend now, but in his heart, he remained what he had always been. A man who longed for home and never stopped walking toward it. The Odyssey was over. Peace had returned to Ithaca.